I am honored to introduce, to welcome the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who is one of Ukraine's stars. He has been in office for several years now, but he is a forceful advocate for Ukraine and the needs of the country. He's a wonderful spokesperson, and without further ado, please welcome Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. I had the opportunity of seeing the foreign minister about 3 or 4 weeks ago in Ukraine, when unfortunately we were under attack again. They were under attack again, renewed attack by the Russians. They're under constant attack, but sometimes they get a little reprieve. And the foreign minister was, although he was in a situation where we had not yet provided assistance to Ukraine, as always, he was very forceful in what Ukraine needs, in the determination of his country, of the leadership of his country to prevail. We heard last night from Secretary Blinken that strategically Ukraine has already won, but they have to defeat Russia's vicious human rights breaking foreign policy. They have to prevail on the battlefield in order to make the Russian government understand that this approach that they are taking, this neo-imperial approach to Ukraine and the world, will not prevail, will not succeed. So Minister Kuleba, I am really excited to have you here. Our time is limited, so I'm going to throw some big, broad questions at you. One is, if you come back to Sedona, and hopefully you can come back in person next year, will you still be the wartime foreign minister of Ukraine? Meaning, what do you see in the next year in terms of the war and how Ukraine will prevail?
I'm afraid, Evelyn, even when the war ends, I will remain a wartime minister, because it's a state of mind that you cannot simply jump out of and leave it behind. If I make it to Sedona, which I would be happy to do, I would probably just have some whiskey with the mayor and all your beautiful team, trying to get in and enjoy a good conversation.
We made a note of it.
About future.
Well, so let's talk about what Ukraine needs now. We have actually in our crowd here today members of what we call the Ukraine Business Alliance at the McCain Institute. They are defense, tech, and tech companies who have been working on the ground to make sure your government can keep going, to make sure your military has the intelligence it needs to fight the war, a whole host of communications, help that they're giving for free. But of course, the key thing, aside from keeping the civil society going, which is very important, is the war. But you are someone who has spoken about the need to protect civil society and your economy, as well as the need to fight the war and prevail. Can you talk a little bit about what the most urgent needs are? You have some very powerful, influential people in the room here today. What can they do over the next 6 months to ensure that Ukraine is in the best position possible?
Air defense, artillery ammunition, and electronic warfare. These are the three things which will decide the outcome of the combat part of the war. And belief and faith in Ukraine is what will decide the political part, the outcome of the political part of the war. When it comes to air defense systems, we always speak about Patriots first and foremost, for a very simple reason, because Patriots is the most reliable and the only available system, available to us that can intercept ballistic missiles. The most severe damage inflicted on Ukraine is inflicted by ballistic missiles. When it comes to air defenses, please do not waste time on explaining why it is so difficult to get them. Unfortunately, I know this story from A to Z, and it's not difficult to get them. They are there. There are plenty of them. Just bring them in, and you will see them working and serving their purpose, defending people, defending economy, defending our society from total destruction. And I'm not exaggerating when I say total, because this is the goal of Russia. to totally destroy our energy system, to totally destroy our economy, and deprive us of resources necessary for successful war effort. Artillery ammunition is obvious, you need it for the front line. Russia critically overwhelms Ukraine in this area. Russian defense industrial base today is more productive than the whole Western base when it comes to the production of ammunition. When I say Western, I mean both, let's say, NATO countries plus Ukraine, because we ourselves ramped up production enormously. And electronic warfare, it's because the war changed. The nature of the war changed in the last 12 months. It's getting more and more digitalized, and the most efficient weapon on the battlefield is a drone. And drone is a gadget, essentially. And finally, on believing in Ukraine, I know there are different analysts, strategic plans. Always remember one thing: none of serious analysts, both government and non-government, believed in Ukraine on the eve of the large-scale invasion in February 2022. All of them were giving us from 3 to 10 days. 2 years after, we are still talking. We are fighting, and we are doing much, much better. And we showed proof to everyone that when we have everything we need, we can defeat Russia. So just give it to us, and we will show you what we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. It is truly amazing if you think back on what the people of Ukraine have done. And even when I was there, as I said, about a month ago, and your military was rationing ammunition, what I heard from Western newspaper reporters who said that their Ukrainian colleagues went to the front lines, and those poor soldiers rationing ammunition, they still were so determined. And the people of Ukraine are so determined. It is, however, becoming increasingly harder to maintain focus on Ukraine, of course, because we've spent a lot of time here talking about other hotspots like Gaza and the Middle East. And then next door, you have Republic of Georgia, there are demonstrations. Because you're foreign minister and you are engaging also, obviously, in diplomacy impacting on other parts of the world, can you talk a little bit about what your message is now as you're looking at Tbilisi and the people in the streets of Georgia who, frankly, might be facing a similar kind of Maidan 2014 situation where the people of Georgia very much want to become part of the European Union, just as the Ukrainian people, especially the young people, wanted to become part of the European Union in 2014 and went to the streets demonstrating against their government, which was not taking them in that direction and was in fact taking them back towards Moscow. This is a similar situation playing out right now for those of you who don't follow the Republic of Georgia in the Caucasus. Can you talk a little bit about what you would advise us to do right now with regard to Georgia and how we should be approaching Putin, because this is all part of one global game that he's playing?
You are absolutely correct. If Putin has time and resources to play simultaneous games in different parts of the world, then the United States and other countries have no excuses to argue that they do not have sufficient resources and time to handle different crises and developments in different parts of the world. I mean, guys, you are still the most powerful country in the world. You cannot complain you are too busy with too many crises, especially when the future of the world that you built and benefited from depends on the outcome of this crisis. And the war of Russia against Ukraine is detrimental to the future of the world. I think that is pretty obvious to everyone. Caucasus has always been an exciting place. And yes, we see that Georgia is getting closer to Russia, but isn't it amazing to see that Armenia is moving away from Russia? So the fact that Azerbaijan and Armenia seem to have reached a deal on the border, this region is changing, and yes, Russia loses in some part of this region, but gains in another. But specifically coming specifically to Georgia, it's painful to see as much as it is for you to see what is happening there. The country seems to be torn and divided between the economic benefits that cooperation with Russia brings and freedom. So this is the choice that the people of Georgia will have to make, and based on their history, I believe they will make the right choice.
Yes, I would agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister. One other question that hasn't really come up in the conversation, we will have some conversation this afternoon with regard to China. Your country and your president has been very deft alongside you, or you have been deft alongside him in reaching out to any country that will listen to Ukraine's argument about neo-imperial Russian designs. And China has said, right from the beginning of this new invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago, that they have a special strategic partnership with Russia. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage diplomacy with China?
In a Chinese way, we too.
Please elaborate.
Yeah, it's not easy. We do not have too many active channels of communication with them. But the difference, the progress that we made over this last 2 years, I would say, may not sound solid and impressive for an outside listener, but we started this war having conversations where both sides were just reading their speaking points, and every attempt to engage China in a meaningful conversation would end up in the repetition, in a very dry, cold repetition of speaking points. Over the last months, we had a number of contacts where we had really meaningful conversations with them, and they seem to be more and more curious about developments. I think they're surprised as much as Russia that we Ukrainians are still alive and fighting and have chances to prevail. And they start asking themselves questions. But of course, they see the struggle in Ukraine in a much bigger framework of the future of the world, and it needs to be taken into account. We are now working on organizing a peace summit initiated by President of Ukraine and hosted by Switzerland. China is invited. I think the date is settled. It's mid-June. So let's see how China handles this particular undertaking. It will say a lot about their overall strategic attitude.
So they haven't RSVP'd yet?
No.
Okay, well, the members of the media can now ask the Chinese whether they're going to go to the peace summit. I know that Russia is not invited. Russia is not ready to make peace. We only have a few minutes left, Mr. Minister, so I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about Ukraine's prospects for joining the European Union. This has been a really incredible, I guess the downside of the United States being kind of a dithering ally and making everybody nervous, especially in Europe, has been that the Europeans have really stepped to the plate. We heard last night from Secretary Blinken. I don't have the statistics at my fingertips, but I myself, as somebody who has for a long time complained about Europeans not providing enough assistance to provide for their own defense and their own national security and international security interests, have been pleasantly surprised by how much the Europeans have outstripped us in terms of assistance to your country. And of course, now they're opening the door to EU accession. We, of course, have taken a different, still very cautious approach with regard to your NATO membership. So can you just say a few words on Ukraine's prospects for both of those very important international entities that you will hopefully be joining in the very near future? So I've basically said how I feel about NATO.
Candidly speaking, if Ukraine was admitted in NATO in 2008 or 10, this war wouldn't be taking place. And
Right, because
it
we
wasn't
left you in limbo. Yeah.
You not only us, you also left Georgia in limbo. And you wouldn't be asking this question today about Georgia. So every time you hesitate, Putin acts. It's simple. And the problem is that we pay for your hesitation with our lives. And when I say you, I do not mean only decision makers in the United States, but also in other places, in other Western capitals. And I'm sorry if I sound too blunt. I'm extremely grateful to the United States for all the help you are providing. But we are in a state of war. And all of us, including politically, we all understand what is at stake. And we have to have an honest conversation in order to avoid mistakes that led us to this state of play. Second, but this is the past, okay? Past is the past. What's done cannot be undone. Speaking of today, I think we work in paradigm where Putin is guided by the will to escalate, and the West and NATO is guided by the fear to escalate. And as long as it stays this way, NATO will be one step behind Putin. And this is no good, neither for NATO nor for the United States in particular. So fear of escalation is an extremely damaging concept, because Putin is playing with it extremely skillfully to escalate, and achieves only one result: escalate. Every time the West demonstrates the fear to escalate. So Ukraine will be a member of NATO. I agree with you. It's just a matter of time and price that we will pay for this. Is there an alternative to Ukraine's membership in NATO to ensure Euro-Atlantic security? As of now, no, there is no alternative to that. That's very clear. This is the only way to prevent future wars in Europe, is to have Ukraine in NATO. On EU, picture is more rosy. We're about to begin accession talks. EU actually showed more resolve and commitment by issuing an invitation to Ukraine and giving us candidacy status, opening accession talks. So we are moving forward. It's a lengthy process, but we will make it. And we see a lot of commitment, and there is no fear of escalation when it comes on the side of Europe when it comes to the issue of Ukraine joining the European Union. Once Ukraine is in EU and NATO, security and prosperity architecture of the West will be completed.
Exactly. That is a fantastic note to end this conversation on. I wish we had another 30 minutes. Minister Kuleba, thank you so much for your time. Please give the minister a round of applause.